the experience I have as a gun-owning black man is not the same as somebody else who is not black and owns a firearm. And the reason is because there is a historical element that tells some people that I'm probably going to be more of a threat with a gun in my hand than somebody else. And even though that is not the majority, at least from my experience, it's still an issue. And so we can honestly, I think we're safe to say that we can all acknowledge the fact that the image of the black man on TV is not a good one. It's one of violence, hyper-masculinity, destructive. And so when you add a gun to that mix, and you're the only and the only interactions you ever had with them was what you see on television or in the news or in the media, it's not gonna be good. Because I never know, I can get pulled over at any given moment and I don't know which cop I'm gonna get. Because as we all remember and we all acknowledge, cops are individuals too. You know, they work for an organization, but they are individuals. And they come with their own prejudice and they come with their own bias and their own stereotypes. But if you think for one moment that I don't consider the fact that I could run into a cop who may not be well-trained, may have a perceived notion about my threat level because of my skin color, and as a result, end up overreacting in a situation that's unwarranted, fooling yourself. But we have to remember there's still elements in this country that don't or haven't made that progression. And they are in positions of authority. They are in positions of power. And they can exact that power the way they see fit. And sometimes with repercussions, and sometimes there are no repercussions. Nothing's perfect. And we have to acknowledge that. It's something I have to think about. I just do. And I don't like it any more than anybody else who has to think about it. And I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who aren't black who don't like the fact that it is a talking point, because as a country, we've made so much progression when it comes to race relations. It's ridiculous. And anybody who says otherwise is a fucking liar.
My biggest concern is that my 24-year-old son makes it home every night. You know, my son could be mistaken for something that he's not and then killed by a police officer because he's scared of my son for the way he looks, or the fact that he's almost 6 feet tall, or the fact that he has an imposing figure. That keeps me awake some nights. It does.
You've had your own dealings prior to becoming an officer, and that's actually what made you want to become an officer, correct?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, you know, the first experience I had, I was about 15 years old. Sitting on a bus stop one night, and a police officer comes up, and he gets out of his car, and he grabs my bag, he starts searching it. No cause to do so. Tells me, or asks me, what are you doing downtown after dark? And I said, I'm waiting for the bus. And he said, well, niggers don't walk downtown after dark when I'm working. 2 years later, I'm walking home again. This time I'm not sitting on the bus stop, I'm walking. Police officer gets out of his car, pushes me up against the wall. He searches my pockets and roughs me up a little bit. And then he takes off. And both of those situations, I think the second one actually bothered me more than the first, because at least I knew with the first police officer who he was. When you said niggers don't walk downtown after dark,
you know exactly what you're dealing with.
I know where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But the second guy, I never got an explanation.
Yeah.
And you know, I thought of those as true examples of bad policing. And my purpose for becoming a police officer is if I want my community to get better service, then I probably should be the person to provide it. And I think the secret motivation was I hoped to become high-ranking and fire him. But that never happened.
I don't think anybody can blame you for that. I personally, like, I've had my own run-ins with police officers. I've had one really bad experience where a cop jumped out, drew his gun on me, completely unwarranted, at least from my perspective. Right. I can't say with absolute certainty that he acted the way he did because we were black. I didn't get the verbal confirmation that you got from your first encounter. But it did cause me to question
Yeah.
right? Would he have acted the same way if it was a car full of white kids or another race? So Tony, how long you been out here?
I've been out here for like 10 years.
10 years?
About 10 years.
So what are your interactions like with the cops out here?
I don't mess with police. I avoid the police.
Let's talk as a whole, right? Let's say just the interaction in general with the community and the police. What is that like? Is it a positive interaction or negative?
That's not positive. Nobody like the police.
Why is that?
Police just automatically don't think you're doing what they want you to think they doing. You know what I'm saying? So it's just unfair. So that's why you just avoid them, because avoiding them is the best way. Because if not, they gonna be having you step out the car, they gonna have you lined up all on the grass, they gonna be doing all that because you got tail light out. Instead of saying, get your tail light fixed.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, that's too much.
Why do you think that is, though? Just from your own personal perspective.
Because they wasn't raised out here, they don't know. They don't live out here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? If you don't live over here, you ain't gonna know nothing.
It's interesting because the rules that are supposed to apply and be there for everyone aren't necessarily the rules that get applied to everybody.
Yeah.
And it's scary because as a mom, you want to see your child grow and thrive and become young men and raise their own families. And some of these men aren't getting this opportunity because the person decided to shoot first and ask questions later.
With respect to the historical element, you know, I think it's incredibly disingenuous to not account for the historical experience of the Black community in this country. I think it's safe to say that it was pretty shitty and pretty terrible and very dark for a very long time in this country. And then when you factor in the fact that the police represented not safety, not protection, not service, but during those times represented the very overt forms of oppression that they were experiencing in their communities at the time. I think it's safe to say that there's naturally going to be a distrust between the Black community and the police. And I think sometimes we don't give enough credence to understanding the level of trauma involved in that. Not to mention that you still have very much a lot of people who are pretty much racist. And then on top of that, get put in positions of power where they can exact that racism against a community that they can't stand to begin with. Within a system that was largely seen as oppressive by the very community that this particular organization is supposed to serve. So when you get something like Mike Brown happening, where you get a police officer shooting a kid in what seemingly was unjustified to some people and justified to others, tensions are gonna boil. And people naturally want an answer. They want a clear, definitive, and clean answer to the issues and the problems in this country. And they don't always exist. And I think sometimes we're scared to admit that. Objectivity doesn't come easy. And the reason why it doesn't come easy is because as humans, we all have emotions. And on the surface, when something looks like something, our natural instinct is to react from an emotional standpoint. Being objective is conscious. Being emotional is reactive. That doesn't mean one's right and one's wrong, but when it comes to trying to solve a problem, I do think objectivity needs to take precedence over emotion. However, objectivity void of any emotion is cold and callous and can be just as destructive.
Man, dead, man. He dead. Police killed him, yeah. Said he had his hands up and everything, they still shot him. He fell on the ground, they stood over and shot him some more.
That could be consistent with his going forward or going backward.
It could have happened if he put his arms across in a defensive manner. It also could have occurred when he was
putting his hands up? We don't know.
There are a number of different possibilities.
The St. Louis region is on edge in anticipation of an announcement from the grand jury that is weighing whether to charge police officer Darren Wilson in the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown. The August shooting led to weeks of protest, some of them violent, and many people fear renewed violence after the decision, particularly if the panel does not issue an indictment.
Good evening. After their exhaustive review of the evidence, the grand jury deliberated over 2 days, making their final decision. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
You need to disperse immediately or you will be subject to arrest.
What you're looking at is the aftermath of the grand jury deciding not to indict Officer Wilson.
This has become a very volatile situation. Protesters have set fire to a business over here. They've broken into the McDonald's.
Tear gas has been thrown.
Tear gas. Tear gas.
Walk me through your experience during the chaos. What was this now quiet suburban street like during those times?
It was real dark, man. It was real dark. I worked at another shop and woke up the next morning and came to the place of business where I cut her at, and it was gone. It was burnt up.
It was terrible only because when you come out of your neighborhood and you come onto West Florissant and you saw the riots, you saw how they had everything blocked out. I never seen anything like that before in my life.
I went. I lied to my family. They said don't go because it was a lot of stuff going on. They didn't want me to get arrested or harmed or anything, but I went anyway because I had to go. Yeah. And I went for 3 days straight. And I was compelled to go. I didn't want to riot. I got 2 kids at home. I didn't want to riot. I wanted answers.
It was a lot of commotion, a lot of people running around, you know, looting and smoke everywhere. You really can't tell the difference if it's smoke from a fire or if it's smoke from tear gas. It looked like we had been through war.
Never been in a war zone, but what I saw was as close to war, hopefully, as I ever get.
Standing out beside the McDonald's and people are throwing stuff at me right now. It's that kind of scene out here right now.
The way it was portrayed is that the community hate the police and the police hated the community.
County police need to take over Ferguson Police Department.
Ferguson was a boiling point. You have social media, you have unfiltered, and then you have all these questions, and no one's really answering, and then they're answering, then they say, oh, no, that's not true. Or we have it on tape. No, we don't have it on tape.
I think Ferguson was the place where we saw social media got way out in front, and you saw an institution that had not moved with lightning speed to adjust to that. And so it became much bigger than Ferguson.
Don't shoot! Don't shoot!
What happened over here that alarmed you, that was risky, that was unsafe, that didn't make the news?
I didn't like the way the news portrayed everything that was going on over here, period. The riot was from the stretch of probably the beginning of that street all the way to the end of the other street. It wasn't all over.
I think that they definitely had an agenda. They made it look like we were animals out there trying to get justice.
Breaking news tonight, chaos erupting on the streets of Missouri.
From what I can explain from interacting with the true residents of Ferguson is they were in shock that out of nowhere we have so much media coverage from outside agencies that want to assume what a community is like just based upon what they were seeing on the news media instead of actually getting out there and shaking hands or getting to know the community.
They didn't show the side of everybody helping out, trying to keep Ferguson, Missouri together as one, as family and friends, even with the community. They wanted to show the outsiders coming in, messing it up.
The imagery they tried to paint of Ferguson before has now somewhat affected Ferguson.
Property value went down. I had investors trying to buy my property so that they can rent it out.
Across the street at Canfield, more than 50 to 60% of the population is gone. Nobody lives over there anymore.
More than half empty, man, that's astonishing.
A lot of houses over here for sale. They're actually going real cheap. They made it seem as Ferguson, Missouri is not worth anything, no more to be here.
It's funny that they care so much, but as soon as the last Molotov cocktail was thrown, as soon as the last armored vehicle went up the street, they left.
And never came back.
What's your opinion about why the news would show all the destruction, but wouldn't show any of the positive work? What's your take on that?
I hate to say it's like part of that plan. What they're showing you is what they want you to see. They don't show you the good, not too much of it. Not too much of it. We can't give you too much good.
They pulling the wool over your eyes.
They pulling, they hoodwinked.
There you go.
Bamboozled.
It was surreal. You don't realize how much of an impact it had on the entire city until you speak to those who are directly connected.
One thing that I pulled out of it, outside of the chaos, is every jurisdiction was tied up. Nobody could respond. Police communication was shut down.
You have one area that's bombarded with police officers from all around the city, all around the entire St. Louis, Missouri region. Yeah. What about the areas that were left unprotected by the police? Now what happens?
How long is it going to take the police to get
They
to
wouldn't have showed up. They wouldn't have showed up that night at all.
It would have took them a while.
How long do you have to save your life?
Seconds.
What is your opinion about, because there are a lot of people that say to guys like me and you, your safety.
Yeah.
You should rely on branches of the government like law enforcement, your local cops and things like that to take care of your personal safety. You don't need to take that into your own hands. We have somebody to do that for you. You get to a point of societal breakdown. Now you have to take care of yourself. Police are obviously busy. Fire trucks came up under fire, literally, trying to put out fires, right?
Right.
So they couldn't respond. So nobody was there for you but you.
But us.
Before Ferguson riots, what was your opinion about that? About you having your own safety in your own hands?
My opinion is still the same, before and after. I definitely stand on having the right to bear arms and protect yourself first. Because what if they can't get there? Like you said, they couldn't even come put the fire out. So what do you do at that point? Or even before then, like, stuff happens.
Well, before, I just didn't think I needed to have a gun or, you know, other than a regular alarm system, I didn't think I needed anything. But after the riots took place, yes, I did feel like I needed to take a class and become armed and licensed to carry. Because again, I never thought it would happen here, but it did.
What would you say to the mothers out there that are thinking about self-protection, but that are listening to people to tell them that, no, you don't need to do that. The police are gonna protect you. We're gonna keep you safe. After the incident you lived through and how you changed your outlook about self-defense, what advice would you give that mother?
I would tell her she has the right, ultimately, to protect her family. That's what comes first. And I would tell her to make sure that she demonstrates that right at all costs.
The idea of the Second Amendment is supposed to be about empowerment. You're supposed to be empowering the people in this country. And the only way that we can do that is by having these conversations and being able to have them conversations honestly. And I think one of the most dangerous thing that I'm seeing taking place now is this idea that everyone is so sensitive and everyone is so easily offended that even trying to have these conversations are incredibly impossible because we can't get past the feelings. And I'm not saying that feelings are irrelevant. What I'm saying is just feelings don't make you right, and they don't make you wrong.
Policing in general has a huge emotional element to it because you're dealing with human beings.
Yeah.
And, you know, no matter how much science there is, there's no exact science on human beings. I think when you understand who you're dealing with, when police officers know the neighborhoods that they're in and they know the people, you know those subtle nuances that may cause things. And so I think that helps you to get to the root of things.
If you live in the area, you're interacting with people on a daily basis, even when you're not clocked in. And you're going to get to know your neighbors. The police officer did not live in Ferguson, so he wasn't accountable to Ferguson. He lived 45 minutes away in South County, St. Louis.
One of the things that happened with me as a young policeman is I ended up policing in the very neighborhood I grew up in. And because I knew the people in the neighborhood, I knew dynamics of the problems that would not have been available to other members of law enforcement. And so I was able to help solve some of those problems rather than arresting and creating a situation where it wasn't a constant revolving door of going in and out of the system. So I think the more you understand people, the more you get to know people, the better you are at being able to deliver a service.
It got a lot to do with background and what somebody been through.
Yeah.
It got to deal, like, if you got everything given to you, you gonna feel different for somebody who had to work every day in and out just to get the little bit.
Yeah.
Because they wasn't raised out here, they don't know. They don't live out here. You know what I'm saying? If you don't live over here, you ain't gonna know nothing. Like, I intimidate the next man if I go in Winterville somewhere, but I ain't on it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's different.
The only way that you can get someone, say for instance, like a cop who's never encountered another black person other than when he pulls them over and when he deals with them from a criminal standpoint, to understand and to have a different experience, is to be able to have these conversations and to have them in the public, have them in the media. Because that's the only way a lot of people are gonna develop these perspectives, and vice versa. If you have a black person who's grew up in a community where the only thing he sees are white people as an oppressive force by way of being cops, what do you expect their perception to be? What? Especially if the only conduit in which to see something that contrasts that perspective is what they see on TV and in the media. It's just gonna be the same thing over and over and over and over and over again, and nothing's gonna change.
I think we need to dialogue. I think we need to start talking, civilized discussions too. It doesn't have to escalate.
Yeah.
And we can agree. You may not ever agree with me, and that's fine. I need to be fine with that. And you need to be fine with me maybe not agreeing with you. But we gotta start by having these conversations, and we gotta start by not letting our preconceived notions from the media or whatever factor into that. We gotta get past that.
And right now we don't have that in this country. But we have our parties, we have teams that go into the corners, and then they only meet in the middle when they want to duke it out and see how many points they can score against each other. And then after that's done, they go back to their corners. And that's it. Nothing gets changed, nothing happens. And the funny thing is, the only people who are duking it out are the extremes on either of these sides. It's not the people who are in the middle, who are looking for some type of direction and understanding and looking for more information so they can develop a thought or an opinion on a particular matter. It's the same thing, it's what's happened in Ferguson. The information was so skewed, so all over the place, that it was hard for people to decipher what was what. One minute it was this, the next minute it was that. And then you take into account this obsession with having immediate information, right? Then the facts don't matter anymore. It's who can just put out whatever information they choose to put out the fastest. And the juicier the information, the better. So, I don't know, it's tough. And I would love to sit in front of this camera and spew out a bunch of rhetoric that gives you the affirmative on each side, but there isn't one. I know it makes people feel good to think that, you know what, I have all the answers. I know exactly what the problems are and I know exactly what the solutions are. But it ain't true. Like you look at any relationship, there's always gonna be a conflict. We are in a massive relationship with each other in this country. And we all have different perspectives, different backgrounds, different outlooks. And we're supposed to share this country together. But like in any other relationship, if the communication sucks, the relationship will die.
Real quick before you go, I want to talk about the guide I put together titled, If I Could Carry Only One Gun. In this guide, I talk about which gun that would be and the reasons why. So be sure to click the link in this video to download your free copy today. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. I'm Colion Noir, and I'm out.